we have a really strange mixture of biblical theology, the supernatural world, the unseen world, mixed in with all this UFO stuff, sightings, alleged alien contact and abductions. What do we do with all this? How do we process it? I really do think processing is the
We're here to talk about the divine council, aliens, UAPs, America, empires, and somehow how Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson tie all of this together for us. My favorite podcasts include The Bible Project, Blurry Creatures, Sunday Cool, The Bible Unmuted, and also the Joe Rogan podcast. Although Rogan's not a believer, I appreciate his ability to get on a variety of guests and that he is not controlled by mainstream media or has some type of political agenda that I can see. So Saturday morning, I was watching Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson interview, and my jaw literally hit the floor. This channel has a focus of bringing to light the divine council worldview and how it points to the nations and empires of this world being led by evil spiritual powers. So when Tucker and Rogan talked about aliens and the possibility of it being connected to spiritual evil, and also even indirectly connecting it to the second rebellion in Genesis 6, I immediately reached out to my resident biblical scholar, alien expert, Matt Halsted. And here we are, folks. That clip just really sparked me, and Matt is so awesome that he agreed to come on here and kind of talk about it. So before we even go any further, what I want to do is quick show this clip for everybody and for you, Matt.
So I got this from someone in the U.S. government. He sent me this. The above is 100% legit. I was read into this program but told never to tell anyone. It's now been released. As you can see, it began as a result of my old program, AATIP. I signed a document saying I would never talk about Kona Blue and similar efforts. I can't believe the AARO would have released it.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what we do know, is that there's enough going on in the skies, but not just the skies, underwater, that the U.S. military has been forced to respond to it. So, like, move aircraft from one place to another because there are too many of these objects in the sky. That's actually happened. Chris Mellon just wrote a long piece about it. But in general, no, they can't control these objects. So, no, it's not American technology.
Well,
or Russian or Chinese. It predates, all of that.
well, some of it does, right? Like, for sure, the Kenneth Arnold sightings, that was really early on. That was like the early 1950s. He was seeing these flying saucers, these discs that were moving over mountains.
Well, right. I mean, the prophet Ezekiel writes about it in the
Right.
first chapter, Wheels in the Sky.
Yeah, that's a crazy one. Boy, when you
Well,
read
it is
that,
crazy. If
Yeah.
you read it, it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And
a wheel
so,
within a
and not
wheel.
just, the Hebrew scriptures, like it's all over every,
the Vedic texts.
of course.
So while we're talking about UAPs, I wanted to bring Ezekiel's vision of the spinning wheels that constantly get brought into the UFO discussion. You mentioned this kind of already, how these biblical stories just come to light once these things come out. And this is one that comes up over and over again. So I want to check out this clip real quick and then have you respond to it.
One of the things that always comes up in this discussion is Ezekiel 1. I think the simplest thing I could say to this is we actually have the Polaroids of the day for what Ezekiel saw. We don't have to guess. We actually have pictures of what Ezekiel saw. And that sort of takes people back, like, oh, they didn't have cameras back then. No, they didn't, but they did sculpture. They did things like this, and every element of the description, the wheels, within wheels, under a platform, were cherubim, 4 faces facing in different directions. On top of them you have a round, flat throne, dais, with the throne on top for the deity or the king. Every element of that description is found and known from Babylonian iconography or Phoenician iconography, and in some cases Canaanite iconography. Now the Babylonian stuff is important. Why? Because Ezekiel's in Babylon. And what he's actually doing is not describing a spacecraft. He's describing an enthroned deity. But who does he have on the throne? He has the God of Israel on a throne that people both from Israel and Babylonians would understand that it's the Israelites' God that is in control.
Okay, so respond to that clip and tell me about your thoughts about Ezekiel's vision.
Yeah, clearly, and I, let me just start off saying I totally agree with what Mike says there. Like, he's 100% correct, and I would just add to this is that nowhere in the Bible are there UFOs.
Yeah.
There are no UFOs in the Bible. There are no extraterrestrials or anything like that. So we've covered both of our bases. The ET hypothesis isn't explicit in the Bible at all. The UAP issue is not found there either. I don't think Ezekiel saw a spaceship. There are lots, as Mike was saying, there are lots of rumors and discussions about this, and it seems to be creeping back up in light of the recent testimonies and things like that. People are trying to bring religion back into this, and specifically the Bible. The trouble though is that if you look at Ezekiel chapter 1, you do get this rather mysterious sort of vision that Ezekiel has. He has what he thinks is what seems to be at first some sort of storm cloud off in the distance with lightning and flashes of lightning, and then it comes really close to him. And as he looks at it, he sees these 4 humanoid, oddly looking creatures with multiple wings, and the way they're moving is rather interesting to him. But they're clearly humanoid. And if you pay close attention to the text, I mean, it doesn't look anything like a spaceship or a saucer or anything like that. But what they're doing is they're kind of holding up this platform. The word there is the rakia. It's a Hebrew word. And I'll get to why that's important in a minute. But there's this platform, and above the platform that they're essentially holding up, and there's 4 of these living creatures, sets the God of Israel. And in the words there are used to describe the God of Israel, like the appearance of the glory. The glory is a big motif here. And of course you do have this idea, these wheels that are prominent in this text, and they seem to be part of the movement of this vision. There are wheels within wheels and whatnot. And so people will jump to that and say, oh, this is like a spinning saucer, or these are different lights on the saucer. Ezekiel clearly had an ET, or rather a UFO experience in Babylon. Again, so the couple of issues with that. One is the internal evidence. So the Bible is actually, just Ezekiel, start there. Ezekiel is actually rather clear about what he saw. It's no mystery to him what he saw. He tells us several chapters later, because everybody looks at Ezekiel 1. If they read the whole thing, get some context, then they'll see that Ezekiel actually says that these are cherubim, which are sort of like they're these angelic type, with winged angels. I don't like to use the term angels because that conjures up all sorts of different things, but it's the best I've got, given our current modern context.
Good guy, spiritual being.
Spiritual beings. They're sort of like honor guards of, like, God, who is a maximally great being, as philosophers will say, he does not need guarding. He's the creator of all things, right? And so, but he still has these beings around him. You look at Isaiah, for example, the prophet Isaiah, he has these beings singing the praises of Yahweh. Here you have these other beings sort of escorting Yahweh and acting as a throne for Yahweh. And these are called cherubim in Scripture, and that's exactly what Ezekiel says. So there was this idea in ancient Israel that cherubim were always associated with the throne of God. And when you look at other passages in Scripture, I'm thinking of 1 Samuel, I'm thinking of Exodus, you get this idea that God is enthroned upon the cherubim. In fact, at the ancient tabernacle and temple, you have this Ark of the Covenant. We're all familiar with the Ark of the Covenant, and on the Ark, or in the Ark, are certain objects that are very important to ancient Israel. But on top of the Ark, you have this lid, and the lid associated on top of that is are these 2 winged creatures with wings extended out in front of each other, toward each other rather. And these are the cherubim. And the reason that's as important is because the Ark of the Covenant, and it resided in the Holy of Holies, the central, most sacred part of the temple. The Ark represented a connection with the throne of God. And the idea was that God's presence sat right above the Ark of the Covenant, that this represented his throne, which is why you have cherubim on top of it, because that upon the cherubim is where God sits. And so that was just how the biblical idea was, or that's how ancient Jews understood the idea of God's throne, is that he's got cherubim who are holding him up. That they are like the throne itself. And actually, what you also have here is the connection between heaven and earth. So the Holy of Holies is, for lack of better word, we're talking really weird stuff, so I'm going to use a weird word, but I think it captures the idea, is that the Holy of Holies is sort of like a portal, if you will. Like, it's the place where heaven and earth meet, because that's where God's Spirit is. His throne is in heaven, but his footstool is here on earth in the Holy of Holies. But a throne and a footstool were connected in the ancient world. They were part of the same thing. So the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubim, that's part of the throne that's in heaven, and that's the place where God is. It's heaven on earth, if you will. Now, when you have Ezekiel's vision, he sees the same thing. He's got cherubim, they're holding up God, and they're acting as a throne. They've got wheels, because these ancient thrones had wheels on them. There are what Mike calls Polaroids. There are inscriptions and sculptures that show really interesting details of these things. And not only were the ones on this documentary that you showed, but there are other ones out there. I encourage everybody to go Google these. But and so these thrones were movable. They had wheels, and you could carry your deity, your king, wherever you wanted to, right? Wherever he needed to go. And really, that's the message. That's the theological message here in Ezekiel, is that Ezekiel is in exile. He's in captivity, and he needs to be reminded that God's throne is everywhere. He reigns in Babylon too. Like, he's in charge there as well, and that gives him comfort. And the other thing too is we need to go back and talk about that platform that the cherubim are holding up on which Yahweh sits. It's called the rakia. In Genesis 1, this is the firmament. It's a hard surface that's above the earth, that holds the waters above the earth. Okay. And that's sort of this separation. It's a key part here. In the ancient cosmology, is that God resides above us, in a different plane, different level, and perhaps that's why the rakia there is mentioned as well. It's important to remember, obviously, that ancient peoples did not have an updated version or a correct version, scientifically correct version of cosmology. So they had a different idea. They thought that there was actually a hard surface above in the sky, right? And so what Ezekiel sees is sort of like a microcosm of how God rules and reigns, that he is above the rakia, but he's present with even Ezekiel in Babylon. So there's lots of different things here. If you really pay attention to Ezekiel 1, it looks nothing like a flying saucer. Okay. It really doesn't. And I know people want to go there, and I know people really get excited about that, but I don't mean to burst any bubbles, but at the same time, we need to be faithful. As good historians, we look at this text with care and make sure that we interpret it correctly. And then, the UAP interpretation falls well short of the historical data.
Awesome. I love the connection that you made with the Ark of the Covenant, and even that being God's footstool in that portal zone really helps connect these two. And then the rakia, I can't wait to kind of dive more into what that means for using that. I think that's just a wonderful point to bring up. So thank you so much.
We need to be honest. The world is a lot stranger than what we think it is. There are a lot of people who just go through life thinking everything is nailed down. We've been given every answer by science, or we will be given that answer by science. There are no anomalies. There's nothing really strange that transcends the physical world. We know that isn't true. There is a spiritual world. And so what we need to do is be honest. The world is a strange place. There's a lot more going on than we might think. And we need to just embrace that idea and then try to process what it is that people experience, what they see, in an honest way.
Thank you for watching another episode of Ring Them Bells. Stay tuned. We have a special part 2 in our interview with Matthew Halsted, going over the divine council, aliens, and a recent Joe Rogan interview with Tucker Carlson. Many people think there's a connection between UFOs, extraterrestrials, spirituality, and the Bible. For example, did Ezekiel see a spacecraft? Are UFOs demons? In this conversation, we take a deep dive into these topics and more. Stay tuned, you guys. You are going to love this exciting episode. The beginning is near.